Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Marketing Matchup. I'm Joe Anthony, co-owner of Gregory FCA and the host of Marketing Matchup. I'm delighted and excited to have two friends in the industry bringing different perspectives in the world of marketing to the table today. We have Monique Kellerman, who has spent more than 20 years in the world of financial services marketing, most recently with an RIA firm out west, and Meghan McCartan, who I've known over the years in the industry, who many of you might know from her days at Hightower. Meghan and Monique, I'm so excited to have both of you here as part of the program. Looking forward to diving in with you today.
Thank you for inviting us. I'm excited to be here. And nice to meet you, Megan.
It's nice to meet you too, Monique. We don't know each other,
You
so we
know,
we might have to get into it here.
well, outstanding. That's part of the beauty of Marketing Matchup is we bring together people who don't know who the other guest is going to be, and sometimes they make friends, right? So today's discussion, I think, is fun for me, and I'll be clear with our audience right now. Megan and Monique are free agents, which in a lot of ways I think allows me to ask some questions that sometimes are a little sensitive when you ask somebody who is in house working, and so we'll get into some of those fun questions as part of this conversation. But why don't we do this first? Let's get started here. Each one of you, just give our audience a sense of who you are, where you're coming from, and your experience in the world of marketing. And Monique, I'll pick on you first. Give us a quick intro, please.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I am located in Portland, most recently with Vista Capital Partners, where I was the marketing director. And prior to that, I led product marketing for a very large credit union on the West Coast, First Tech Federal Credit Union. So I have a fair amount of experience with consumer product marketing and financial services, as well as the wealth management space. And like you mentioned, I'm a free agent. And Megan, I love that you are too. I'm looking forward to learning more about your journey as well.
Awesome. Megan, your turn.
My whole career has been in financial services, wealth management. I've been done a little bit of fintech stuff, but mostly in the broker dealer side, RIA side. Was most recently at Hightower. I left last May, not the one we just had, the one prior. And I've been feeling like I've been out for a while, but I guess it's more and more people have been taking a little bit of a longer break. I made the choice. I have four daughters, so I made the choice to spend last summer with them. My eldest is a senior in college now, and she's doing international relations. So I think she's going to be all over the world. I wanted to be able to spend that time with them. So I did take last summer, and I was like, be able to get back to work in the fall. So now I need to get back to work because I feel like my brain is mushy and I can barely even operate a phone. So I got to get back to making charging up my brain.
Well, listen, I think the two of you, with your experience and background, are folks that, as I look at the landscape, and those that listen to my podcast and have heard me on stage in places, I've talked a lot about the what I call the dislocation or misalignment of the actual talent that's out there versus what firms need to establish organic growth and have a concerted marketing efforts. The world we're in today, I mean, marketing, organic growth, they're all blend together. The worlds of PR and marketing have converged, and so the roles for people like you are always changing, whether you're on a team or a free agent, as they say. And I think one of the things that I like to start with it would be when you think back to uh, your breaking in point and where you first got into financial services and RIA marketing. Starts with the question when people are looking for talent, like, do people actually dream of being a financial marketer? Like, Monique, tell me, like, was this always your first passion, or how'd you find your way into this?
It was not my first passion. In fact, if someone had told me, 20, 25 years ago that this is where I'd land, I don't know what I would have done. I would have gone on a very long vacation. I originally in high school loved running for student government office, and I thought I was destined for law school or politics. I loved campaigning, and I should have connected the dots that that meant marketing, not necessarily politics. So I went to a liberal arts college intending to go to law school. I got my degree in rhetoric and media studies, and coming up on my senior year, I realized that I had a lot of student debt and wasn't quite ready to go to law school. So I jumped into PR instead. And this was in the late 90s. So I got into startup PR, worked for a firm that had a lot of startup technology clients, and I had a few that happened to be in the fintech, if you could even call them fintechs back then. And when the dot com bubble burst, I moved on to be working in house for a consultancy that worked with credit unions on their credit card programs. So that's really kind of where I started to build my expertise beyond PR into broader marketing and communications. Really got to understand financial services, credit unions, analytics from a financial perspective, and how the data and analytics really drive those business decisions. So that was kind of how I got on the path into financial services.
I love that you said data and analytics drive these decisions. We're gonna come back to that in a little while, but I appreciate that, Tia. Megan, for you, what was your journey like? Was this something you always dreamed you'd do?
Well, my dad was in advertising, so I worked in New York, like, they're the Mad Men guys, but and so he was always like, "Don't get into advertising." So, Monique, obviously, we were meant to meet because I went to college, I went to William Mary, and got into politics right after right after college, and my candidate lost. So I was like, "This is terrible. You can work so hard and your candidate loses." And so, I actually went to business school and, the one thing I didn't wanna do was get into financial services because I thought it was boring, so I went into fashion, because I thought that was exciting, so I worked for Bloomingdale's, and it was not exciting. It was like, slogging through fashion shows that were setting up chairs and taking them down, and it's not exciting and there's no money. So then I got into financial services because you can do cool things because there's money to support the storytelling and the branding and all of those different kinds of things. So that's really where um, I found an interest that, like, the branding and the storytelling is what compels me, and the money to be able to support that was what was cool.
And those are both interesting backstories in terms of how we got here. And I think one of the things we've seen that money and influencers and things like that have made wealth and wealth management and things like that more pop culture. And I think it'll lend itself to future generations where you might have marketers that aspire to do what we do, right? In terms of, I mean, I admittedly, if you told me I was going to be in the world of publicity or marketing, I was like, yeah, with the Yankees, maybe that'd be cool, right? I wasn't thinking in this world of financial services. I'm glad I got here, but I can tell you, I think that it's few and far between someone who's done a 20 plus career that also always dreamed that's what they've been doing. So, it's a good context and maybe a jumping off point for something else. So, when you think about your roles you've had and how you sort of came of age in the market and really earned your chops. What were the things that you found most valuable or constructive in terms of supporting marketing in the places where you, or PR for that matter, in places where you're working? Give our audience a sense like what's something that really works for firms in terms of supporting PR marketing? What's maybe something you might avoid, whether it's something you experienced or something you observed elsewhere? Megan, we'll go first this time. I'd love to see like in terms of settling into the world of marketing and PR, what did you experience that worked, and what might have been a challenge that you encourage firms to work away from?
I think one of the things at Hightower that worked was having when I was there, I was working for Bob Oros, and he's a real believer in marketing. So having that support from the top mattered. And when we went in, advisors, we were telling advisors, we're going to we believe that marketing can help you grow. And some of them were skeptical, and some of them saw marketing as, oh, thanks, we really don't need you to help put our faces on billboards. And we were like, that's not what marketing is. And we took the time to be able to explain, and all we need is referrals. That's what marketing can help you do. Marketing helps you to have the conversations. So really, Bob, as a supporter of marketing and having that support from the top and letting us take the time to explain what we were doing, that made a difference, and not just kind of like, "Hey, we need this quick turnaround. What are you gonna do?" So having that time and not just expecting, because I think we all know, right? Like, marketing isn't a, "Hey, you spent this dollar, where's the dollar back the next day?" To me, that was, the most impactful, and it was really, important to me because I do believe in it. It was nice to be able to have that support from the top down. That was, something that was really great.
Awesome. And Monique, how would you answer that? You know, what works, what doesn't in terms of making sure marketing and PR have a seat at the table?
Yeah, Megan is spot on. That leadership support and having a seat at the table is so important. When you think about marketing, it touches every aspect of the organization. It's the employee experience, the client experience, the growth and lead generation, your operations and data, even your CRM. There's so many different aspects that marketing is, if nothing else, a driver of those relationships, but also needs that information to inform what we are doing so that we can be effective. So that leadership, executive sponsorship is really important. I would also add that training is so important. Our industry is changing constantly. AI was a thing a year ago, but think about how much our understanding of, AI in the workplace and in our marketing strategies has evolved over even the last 12 months. So really keeping up on training, going to conferences, I think is also important. Sometimes it's easy to dismiss those because they're fun. But you also get exposed to different ways of doing things and spark ideas, excuse me, and connections with other professionals. So I think also having an appetite for some experimentation and trying new things. And sometimes that means flops and fails where things don't quite
Mhm.
work out. But many times you learn along the way. There's never a lost lesson in those failures. So being able to experiment and really understand what you're measuring and why and what success looks like is also really important.
Keep coming back to the measurables and analytics and data. So we're definitely going to hit on that. One of the things that has come across my desk a few times is interesting. The feedback I get from counterparts where they'll say things like the biggest challenge for them as marketers or in PR or anything with brand storytelling, brand visibility comes down to there's a dislocation of expectation between what marketing is asked to do and what they're expected to produce. And that could mean, hey, is marketing about awareness or is marketing around feeding the lead beast, right? Or things like that. How often have you observed that where maybe within places you've worked or other firms you studied, do you feel like the firms either got it right in terms of making sure marketing and business development and sales and other facets were aligned versus a struggle to get that connection point to happen? Monique, I don't know if you have any observations there, but I'll start with you.
Yeah. So this is absolutely a common struggle. And I think, I mentioned data and analytics a lot because we like that tangible evidence that what we're doing matters and that it's moving the needle. But there's so much that we can't measure, and that kind of falls into that brand category, the brand awareness, the impressions that people get when they interact with your brand, whether that's reading about you, your CEO being quoted in the, local business journal, or whether they're seeing your logo on a sponsorship packet at a, fundraiser, or wherever else you're showing up in the market. So those impressions you can't measure, but they do amplify what you are doing in the demand gen piece. So where I've been able to measure that was in my time at First Tech, which First Tech Federal Credit Union is a large credit union. We marketed, over 40 different financial products, and these are consumer products that turn a lot more quickly than these advisor relationships are. So we were able to test in the market, credit cards or mortgages, and having the investment in the brand as well as in those really tightly measured performance marketing channels, we were able to see the amplification of the brand spend really also making our demand gen campaigns more effective. So they definitely have a relationship together. You don't have the satisfaction always of being able to measure everything or to, I mean, don't get me started on attribution because that's a whole nother can of worms. But we can't measure everything, but we just have to trust and know that it is having an impact and it is working.
Yeah, and I think, part of the effort is everyone's aligned towards the same objective, but independently what's easily attributed versus what might be a challenge. Uh, you might end up running into situations where people will judge the overall totality of the effort as opposed to individual discrete actions if you're aligned that way.
Yep.
Um, Megan, I'd love to hear from you. So you think about that same question. Um, how important is the alignment of the different marketing and PR functions with the overall sales and growth objectives? Have you seen where it's really worked well? What challenges are there where there may be a miscommunication or misalignment? And how do you overcome those things?
Well, actually, I'm gonna tie it back, Monique, something that you said, in answer to the last question. One of the because I think this is super key. Um, in marketing does have to have that seat at the table to be able to tie all the way across. And one of the things that we started doing was producing a dashboard of, here's all of the things that we're doing, this newsletter, this webinar, this podcast, and here's the results of each of, here's the clicks, here's the opens, here's all of the different things. And we were just sharing it, this is across the firm. And it was eye opening to a lot of people that didn't have any, to tech, to HR, that had no idea that we were even doing a lot of this stuff. So it was giving data, and metrics of that this stuff is out there. But it was also, I think, we're all rowing this ship together. We're all trying to do this kind of stuff to support growth, and like, hey, sales, like, these are efforts that we can all jump in together. And I think that it's so easy to be able to get siloed. Monique, you even mentioned, the piece of going to conferences. It's all because you have to have those conversations. One of the things that we would do, and I've done this in different firms, like having even the in-house events, like getting admin people together, the different marketing people together, because otherwise you're just a lot of times you're in those roles, like working in an office by yourself. How much easier is it to just be able to pick up the phone and call somebody else? And I think we can kind of get in our own way of working solo and being able to pick up the phone and call somebody else. I don't know, Joe, I kind of wandered a little bit from that answer, but
No, you're
it's
good.
like even just getting on the like, I made the joke about our brains turning to mush, but, like, getting on and talking like this, you start to really, your brain gets going again.
All right, so Megan, let's get to another topic here. So, when you think about the opportunity in front of people like you and Monique, and you think of all that you've learned, I love asking this question. If you had to start from scratch today, knowing what you know about wealth management, RIA marketing, give our listeners or viewers a sense of what are some of the things you would do first in order to optimize the likelihood of success in setting. And again, you can presume you're walking into a firm that's got an existing marketing efforts or something that's brand new. But how do you start from scratch, taking over leadership? What should firms expect when they're installing a real forward-thinking marketing campaign?
If I was doing it all over, I probably would go work on below deck and not go work, for an RIA. But I think, I think really there's a lot of talk of building it for scale, right? Like, we have to do scale, we have to do scale, we have to do scale. And I don't think that I think you gotta step away from that, because we're not selling, Slurpees. This is financial advice. This is, like, working with people on the most important thing in their world. So I think it's trying instead to figure out, how do you have conversations? Like, how do you build your schedule and your day to be able to maximize conversations? And that's structure it that way. So forget about scale of in terms of numbers. Think of it like backwards in terms of scale is figuring out the stuff about like making the scheduling and building in the stuff that's less important, but prioritizing your time in terms of conversations and time with clients. And it's not about getting more people in, it's having more quality time with clients. And I think that message is a little bit getting lost as people are talking about we need to bring in more clients, we need to bring in more people. That's not valuable. And I think that, so if I were doing it starting from scratch, how are you going to bring more value, more specialness, so to speak, to the right clients?
So let's dive a little deeper on that. So obviously, looking for a path to be differentiated and connect with your audience a little more crisply and have that resonate. What are some of the things from a sort of call it a contemporary modern marketing mix where you would come in and say, all right, these are table stakes. These are things that we have to think about and do well as in our marketing mix that will help us accomplish that. Where do you think marketers should be focusing to accomplish that?
I think it's really, I'm a giant believer in content, but not the basic content. Like, we would have people come to us and say, we need a brochure about 529s. If I can Google what a 529 is in 3 seconds, which I can, I'm not creating a brochure for you about that. Like, so train your clients to look for that kind of stuff, but give them something that's really, give them content that's special that they can't get anywhere else. Kind of questions are they dealing with? A lot of your clients are probably dealing with being in the sandwich generation, right? So give them really special. They're struggling with their parents aging and trying to figure out, helping getting them into, the right kind of retirement care, like all of those kind of pieces. Give them resources for that and the difficult conversations that go along with that. You don't have to be an expert in it, but help them with those conversations. I think that during right, like, I hate bringing everything back to COVID, but during COVID, a lot of conversations really changed. People started talking about more a lot more than just finances. So use the good part of that people opened up a lot about a lot of different types of things, and be open to your clients. Don't make it just about your portfolio, like your here's your quarterly report. Like, that's a commodity. Make it about a lot more, and be that trust I hate to say the trusted advisor. It's not the trusted advisor for here's your portfolio. It's about, I'm here for all of your different needs, whatever that is, and that's the difference maker.
Well, great. Well, Monique, I'll give you a stab at the same question. When you think about if you're going to go in and boot up or reboot a wealth management RIA marketing effort, knowing what you know in your experience, what are some of the things you'd be thinking about in terms of setting the table and for success in terms of building something out?
So Megan is spot on with building for scale and looking at all of your systems and processes, and the way you do the work is equally as important as the work to be done. We need to get out of the habit of having, one hit wonders, little initiatives or campaigns that we try one time. And all of that work is good for, the second it takes for the email to go out, versus a campaign that, we know that people are always going to be experiencing financial transition. So pick one. Maybe it's inheritance, and build a digital lead gen campaign around, windfall and managing an inheritance and the emotional aspects that come with that. Because there's always somebody that's going to be Googling, what do I do? And you want to be the one that's, showing up in the AI results, no longer the
Yeah.
search results. But if I came into an organization, my first step would be looking holistically at the brand and a brand audit. You want to make sure that all of your touch points are consistent across channels. And from there, you can really then move into more of that proactive lead gen strategy, and really identifying which segments you want to target, understanding what your ideal client personas look like. And you can have more than one. You'll want to understand which financial situations you are particularly suited to solve, and, have a unique perspective or resources that can help. When I was in product marketing, we would always start by identifying what problem our product is solving. It's never about the features of the product, right? Let's take student loan refinance. It's not about the rate or the term or how quickly you can get approved. It is about the fact that somebody is drowning in their payments and it's keeping them from buying a home or having a family. So if you can really understand what you're solving on the other side of them connecting with your product, that's what you need to market. So really getting smart about how you're positioning those campaigns, who's shopping for that solution, where they're going to be looking for information, and then building a plan to put you in front of them in the right time and the right place.
So, Monique, you hit on something I think is goes back to an axiom that I think about a lot. We all hear the phrase "know your audience." Like number one rule for marketing: know your audience. Is it lawyers? Is it whatever, right? And I think know your audience in terms of understand, empathize, Like that first word needs to be more emphasized in content marketing, understand what other levers are and the questions they're asking, the things they're running into in their financial lives that gets them to want to seek advice. I think it's a little twist on that. Let's go into something else you alluded to, giving time for marketing and communications and PR ideas to work and gestate and bear fruit. When you think about that, um, how would you characterize setting out expectations and timelines for successful campaigns? And feel free to apply it to digital marketing or publicity or to lead generation, anything you might have tried in the past. Like, give us an example of how you actually set time and expectations with your internal stakeholders as well as your own observation in terms of what's bearing fruit.
It's such a good question. It again comes back to how much support your marketing and communications people have internally, because there's always, approval and turnaround for different things. And if you're an organization that needs to get buy-in from the entire executive committee, I can't give you an accurate time. It's really on you. We can move quickly when there's something really timely in the market. Maybe it's a market volatility issue that you want to show up, in your local media, or you want to get a communication out to clients or a campaign launched. It's all a matter of prioritizing those urgent things, but also having that partnership with an executive team to, give you the authority and support to move forward quickly. Similarly with digital campaigns, sometimes you want to test different messages and positioning. And so you can get things into market pretty quickly and get a quick read on what might be seeing traction. And from there, you can build things out. But you also don't want to be short sighted and, just be throwing arrows on the wall that are, never going to land. So you want to make sure that you're being thoughtful and strategic. I would also add that doing the work up front on the brand and the messaging and positioning also gives you that foundation so that you're not having to reinvent the wheel every time you go out with a campaign. So that if you have that solid baseline of what your voice and tone is, what your, key messaging pillars are, so that you can be consistent every single time is also a time saver in the long run.
So they're good insights. And Megan, what's your perspective on that? How do you set internal expectations and frameworks for uh, the idea of setting a timeline for marketing efforts or PR efforts to bear fruit? What do you do to make sure you get that right? How do you set the framework for like we need to invest a certain amount of time to see this through?
I think I agree with everything Monique said. I think there's some training involved for, training your in-house, audience. I tell the story a billion times. Like I said, we were training our advisors into what to expect for as we're training them about what marketing is, what campaigns are. I worked a lot with our chief investment officer, and we were sending out her investment philosophy, letting our advisors send it out. We had one guy come back and say, I'm getting okay results on the newsletter. It's like an 80% open rate." And we were like, that's phenomenal. 80% is phenomenal. But he didn't know that. So I think, yeah, some of it is training and letting people know what it is. One thing that, Monique, you said is like, avoid the one hit wonders, right? So I think that's being able to have like a campaign that's got some staying power, and then just that being able to check in a little bit. Like, even simply following up with some phone calls, to a couple of the key, like if a campaign's going out there and, "Hey, are you gonna come to this webinar? What are you thinking?" And people, getting a little bit of a pulse check, at least something's working, or people being like, "Absolutely not, no one's coming to this webinar," then at least you're getting a little bit of a pulse check. But I think it is setting expectations with people that, like 10% on a webinar is good, right? I mean, uh, it's really training the the audience, if the audience is your stakeholders.
Yeah. So you both mentioned, giving, talking about experimenting with new things. What would you say, Megan, is the biggest challenge for firms in adopting new ideas or new strategies? Trying like like right now, one of the things that we're doing for our clients, for example, is we're helping them get a grasp on how they're showing up in AI search. We launched something called the Gregory Influence Engine a few weeks ago, and there's a lot of interest on the front end to see how they stack up. They want to, and a lot of firms want to do audits and see what they are. but very few have that existing precedent that this is what we spend on AI search optimization. And so it's the, hey, we want to do the audit, but we're not really sure if we want to do this ongoing optimization. That's a current example of something that people are wrestling. Do I invest in this new thing? Tell us your perspective on that. What is, how do you decide to usher in these new strategies? What are challenges are there in terms of adopting these things or getting buy-in?
I think it's almost impossible to get buy-in on a lot of stuff. I feel like there's the an advisor role. I don't want to sound negative, but like some advisor will come up with the shiny new thing and want to do it, but then the majority will say no, we don't. I think they it goes back to like there's a billion things that they're trying to do. Their focus should be on working with their clients. So it's the change management. It's trying to figure out, what are there's so many priorities in a day. So how do you do it? Make it as easy as possible, right? Give them the resources to be able to do it. Tell them, and Monique, it kind of goes back to what you were talking about with product management. To tell them why you're fixing the problem. This is your problem. This is what's going to do it, and this is what I'm fixing for you. But I think it's always just such an uphill battle.
How would you react to that, Monique? Would you feel like there's a lot of internal impediments to trying new things?
It depends on the organization, and I mean, not to be a broken record, but really having marketing in the executive suite with the insights and the data and empowered to make decisions. I think anyone that's had their eye on their, Google search results and their inbound traffic from search is seeing a significant drop in traffic, just because the AI results are popping up at the top of the browser and people don't need to scroll down and click through to websites anymore. So if a marketing leader has that data to show that there's that drop in traffic and we all are consumers that are, dabbling in AI and seeing those results ourselves personally. So it's not a stretch to know that we need to change the way that we're doing things and it's not going to just, go back to how it was 2 years ago. Like the train is racing down the track, so we need to adapt and, come up with that AI, strategy.
So let's flip this question on its head for a second. So you think about, moving away from what's new. What are some tried and true, maybe old school or pre-existing methods or initiatives that you think still carry a lot of relevance today in the face of all this change? What are some of the things you might have endeavored to do in your marketing and communications mix that you still think have great application in 2025 and beyond for wealth firms looking to grow and tell their story? Monique, you could take a first stab at this one.
Sure. I think having a content marketing strategy is always a winning bet. There are so many different channels that you can use, and those channels continue to grow and evolve. But fundamentally, knowing what problems you're solving, and the type of people that you can help gives you that foundation to be able to create content that's going to resonate with that end user and pique their curiosity and hopefully bring them through the door. And that can show up as, PR and being in the media. It can show up as, hosting a podcast and inviting, CPAs to talk about, the latest legislation that's going to impact your mutual clients. That can show up on social media, in your blog, on your newsletter. So I think a content marketing strategy is definitely something that you can keep coming back to and know that it'll evolve over time, but fundamentally, it's still going to be relevant.
That's a sharp insight there, Monique. And Megan, how would you tackle that question when you think about what's something that might be established or considered more old school in nature, not newfangled, that you think still has a lot of relevance today in terms of how firms should be shaping their marketing?
Yeah, well, I totally agree with Monique 100%. And then also um events, and not like the steak dinner event thing, but um just like figure out a niche. I'm a quick example, business owners, right? And just do a business owner breakfast, bring in a business coach, and just put 15 people together, do for a year. And I mean, I can think of an advisor that we worked with doing that. We worked with him and found like a really great coach guy that was this is what he advised on. This guy, he did 4 of them. In one of them, he invited 10 guys and got 3 clients. Not 3 prospects, 3 clients out of 1 breakfast. I mean, so just something like that, bringing something special to a small event and making it worthwhile, it goes back to what we keep saying, just getting people together. So, I think, like, those events, again, not the steak dinner seminar, but, unless that works for you, but I think, like, don't, don't poo-poo them. I think they still matter.
And I think more and more because so many of us have gone to hybrid working environments, or I know
Mhm.
travel budgets for work have changed because years ago we were starting to do client engagement. We'd be flying wherever they were in the country, sitting down, and everyone expected everyone's full team to be part of that meeting. Um, Interpersonal interaction is still important to our clients, but it's less exciting for you know you pay for 8 people to come somewhere to do those discussions, and so those events really matter when you're creating those
Yeah.
opportunities for connection, whether it's on a B2C or B2B basis. So let's jump to something else, which I think is really interesting, and I'm observing this all the time with the firms we work with. There's sort of this barbell, this sort of weighted push running two different directions where for the brand equity side of the equation, and I love your reaction to this question, from the brand equity side, of the equation, it seems as if the firm-driven marketing or PR matters more. In terms of the lead generation side, the advisor-led marketing and PR strategies matter more. And so you have one hand, one thing is very micro in terms of how it comes out of my mouth versus your mouth. If we're both advisors of the same firm, might be different. On the other hand, it's super macro to the point about, I think Megan, you alluded to earlier, like racing to scale something so you can have marketing work for everybody. How do you can't deny that both of those are relevant things to do in this world we're in, but how do you balance those two in terms of creating a marketing mix that supports those dual mandates that seem very far apart in terms of philosophy or focus? And Megan, I'm sure your days at Hightower, where you had obviously the big Hightower brand, but a lot of local operations, you probably ran into that question quite a bit. I'd love to have your take on that.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I've been gone for over a year and now they're changing, right? Like it was brand agnostic when I was there. Now they're getting more people under that high tower umbrella. I I think the overall message should just be, I think the better focus for all is just what we're doing for clients, bringing it back to what this industry is for. But I don't know. It can also, that can be a tough sell and come across as a little bit, maybe Pollyanna, right? And it's tough atmosphere to maybe sell that and sometimes, right? So, I think, advisors, in my humble opinion, advisors' best bet is to just more focus on what they're doing and their relationships with clients. Monique, what do you think?
I think, the way I look at it is the brand of the firm is kind of the foundation for all of the messaging and how the advisors are positioned. So all of the advisor marketing needs to be consistent with that overall brand. But I do think that the way advisors show up in marketing, putting a face and, a video or something like deeply personal, that's what's going to resonate with the end user. Because ultimately people want to work with people that are going to empathize with them and who get them and understand, the vulnerability that comes up when you're talking about money and your future. And it can be a deep topic. So I think being able to showcase the advisors and include them in, the marketing and the lead gen is kind of the winning combo, the solid brand and the people behind the brand.
And it's tying to a
Well,
consistent message, maybe less than a name, a consistent message.
Yeah.
I think that, yeah.
so let's go back to something Monique alluded to before. You start thinking about this, whether you're going advisor focused or brand level focused or a mix of both. And frankly, I see a certain scale firms are trying to do both, where they feel the need to tend that bigger brand, but at the same time, they want to make sure that they stay in relationship with their advisors in terms of how they support them going to market. And so It's a lot harder when you're starting from scratch. You don't have a huge marketing budget or marketing apparatus to play both sides. Um, but as you take a look at the bigger picture here, a lot of firms, when they're looking to meet sort of multiple mandates, or because they're struggling with um, producing all the content they need to, or struggling to identify enough marketing talent to do this stuff in house, they end up outsourcing. And this is where firms like mine come in, right? Like, we're agency partners. We do digital and social. We do designing, creative, and PR, and all the things. And that's great for a marketer to have that at their resource. But we all know that agency relationships aren't created equal. And sometimes things work out, and sometimes they don't. Um, again, I'm sure you've had some experience working with agency partners. I'd love to hear what makes a good partnership from the client side, and are some. I'd love to hear maybe one war story about what really challenge you, or was frustrating in your experience? And again, I'm not asking you to say good or bad things about any one firm. I'm just very curious to understand from the client side what works and what can be an impediment in terms of maximizing that sort of, hey, we're going to be your external team on these projects. Megan, why don't you go first with this one?
Sure. I think I think there's some things that work very well with an agency and some things that are tougher. I personally believe that PR relationships should be outsourced to an agency. I think that agencies are very good at that. I think that media relationships, like an agency does that as bread and butter. And I think that it's kind of hard to keep up with it. I think like that's what y'all do as what you do very, very best. And I think and it's ever changing. And so I really believe that PR is best outsourced to a great agency like yours. Um, I think sometimes, so that's an example of where an agency really does great work. I think sometimes, I mean, I think sometimes some creative can be outsourced well. I think the ongoing marketing, it can be very difficult to do, like the day to day. You're it's tough for an agency that's not in with the day to day to know the nuances, the changes, the what's happening, like whose opinion changed, where in the day to day. You're not in there, so a project perhaps, but you're not in the day to day. So the agency can be the very best, but when you're not in the day to day, it's you're at a disadvantage. So it's just simply not fair.
Yeah, it's and so you would say that, where that collaboration is inhibited, it's even harder to really maximize the agency partnership?
Right. Right.
Yeah, gotcha. And Monique, how would you answer that in terms of, like, what works, what doesn't? And, what are, experiences do you have that show, value and sometimes drag on what you're trying to get done?
Yeah, it is a give and take for sure. I think, in my experience partnering with agencies that have specialized expertise that, it doesn't make sense to have a full-time staff member in-house. It's great to work with agencies. In terms of making those relationships successful, I think, having a strong partnership from the onset of, like, that brand planning and the overall, messaging strategy, and making sure that everyone has buy-in on the positioning and the strategy is really important, again, so that when those quick turn opportunities come up, you're not having to reinvent the wheel or wordsmith what your value proposition is. So just having buy-in early on, great communication and partnership along the way. Um, yeah, I'm not sure what more would add to what Megan already shared, so
Well, so you think about agency involvement or hiring team members or trying new initiatives, different things we talked about. It also comes back to the question of how do you get the budgeting for marketing communications, as a CMO? What are the constructs you've used in the past? What do you think is a fair sort of target for firms to start thinking about? Um, some people say, well, if you're not going to commit to more than 10 hours a month of senior management time focus on the initiative, don't do the initiative because you're never going to get it done. And from a time standpoint, what about a dollar standpoint, like what is realistic for firms to be successful and make some dent in any initiatives? And Monique, I don't know what your take would be, but I'd love to start with you just in terms of like how do you set the sort of the framework to actually creating an achievable, functioning marketing environment from a financial standpoint?
I'm so glad you asked this question. This was something that I really learned a lot when I was at First Tech. And again, marketing products for 8 different business lines with multiple products, in each of those divisions. It was a mathematical formula. You need to understand what the, lifetime value of, selling a mortgage is. And as just as an example, you're looking at how long that mortgage is on your books, what the, market resale rate is, what the, APR is on that loan. And from there, you're looking at what percentage you're willing to spend to acquire that business. So when you're looking holistically over your portfolio, you end up with, a number that you're willing to spend on acquisition, and that becomes your marketing budget. And the real magic then is, what do you do with those dollars? How do you craft the, right mix of resources and marketing spend to drive the business that you need? So when I came to wealth management, I was really surprised that, a lot of firms are just allocating a percentage of revenue. And it's a pretty low percentage when you think about, the lifetime value of a client that is probably going to be with you for decades, right? Think about
Yeah.
that. How much should you be willing to spend to acquire a client? It might be, a 5-digit, 6-digit number. So when you look at how many clients you want to bring in over the course of a year as a factor of, what that acquisition cost is, your marketing budget's probably going to be larger than the, 3 to 5% that you might currently be allocating from your, revenue. And if you also factor that you might be wanting to grow and not just looking at your, basic increase from year to year and your, net new clients. Maybe you wanna grow. You're gonna have to spend more marketing to power that. So I think it's really a mindset shift from looking at marketing as a cost center to marketing as a driver of growth.
Well, and I'm glad you outlined it that way because it's something that we've seen so many times where you try to establish what a good framework for budgeting and growth is as a partner. And obviously, some people say, "Well, why is the agency telling their partners how to budget for what they do?" Because obviously, I would say, "Oh, you got to spend more, right?" Because it helps me. But the flip side is, you look at it. We went through this exercise where a firm sat down with us, talked to us about the issue, and they said, "Hey, how do we budget this?" And so I asked the question. Over the last 2 years, what's the typical new client that's walking in the door? And they said roughly about a $5 million account size. Okay, good. Both of your marketers, you can do quick math. There's a decent chance, depending on their fee schedule, that that client probably meant 35 to $55,000 in their first year of fees, right? If you use the close to 1% model, and then I asked the question of, well, how long will their typical clients? Well, they said, well, depending on what age they are, but at least 20 years, the average client stay with the firm. And you start compounding that, and you start thinking about in terms of, well, if you got one new client that came in from this marketing activity, what could your budget be and still justify that for one new client? And so, well, we like to have spend half of whatever the expected value would be. And all of a sudden, it's like, wow, for one new client, you'd be willing to spend $100,000 a year. They started doing that math, and you're like, wow, that's impressive. When you start thinking justifying, and so I don't think firms have ever challenged themselves to walk through on that basis. Like, what's the real milestone to justify this activity? Um, and so Megan, you're nodding along here. I'd like to hear how you'd answer that question. Start thinking about parameters for budgeting, how you figure out how does it get segmented, even in terms of, for example, I'm sort of lumping in everything as a sort of a convergence conversation where SEO and marketing and AI search and PR and everything comes together. But in your world, is this something where firms need a budget for those things separately? Do you sort of tie everything under one roof and say this is all for growth? Like, how do you do it? And then what's sort of like a realistic framework for people to consider?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think you do like Joe, you guys come in and add you bring in like stats and figures and the discussion you just had. Um I have a couple different answers to it. One of the things that we would do when I came to Hightower, our department was small. It was just 3 people. And we ended up growing it out to 25, but it was very thoughtful and one at a time, and, it was sort of like as we uh, as a team would be bursting at the seams with too much work like that, "All right, we need somebody, on that team." And one of the teams was that our advisor growth team, and we ended up like there, all right, well, there's 5 teams that are really willing to pay for a fractional person to be able to help them, and we did the math for that one to be able to say, all right, it's $100,000 basically, like 20 per or whatever. That one was an easy math thing. But I think the flip side piece of that is the awful part is marketing is also the easiest one. All the math in the world doesn't matter when you're not making the numbers, because it was pretty easy to come in and say, "Hey, we need some money out of marketing. Cut, cut."
Yeah.
And it goes back to the beginning of our conversation of you've got to have, exec on board, because it was pretty easy to say, "I don't think marketing matters that much, and we need to make numbers." So, that's the unfortunate part.
So we're
Donk,
getting
donk. I was the downer there.
no, well, it's true, and Megan, we've seen it time and time again, and I think you're actually hitting on an issue that's really relevant for marketing, where you need to understand how fully empowered the marketing organization within a firm is in terms of,
Yeah.
yeah, on one hand, I said, "Do you have a CMO? Do you have a fully empowered CMO?" Because you might have a marketing officer who happens to meet with the C-level executives, but not really a chief marketing officer because they're not allowed to actually run that business endeavor, um, thoroughly. Like, there's a sort of yes, obviously, if it means the difference between paying your people and uh, paying for more Google ad spend, or okay,
Mhm,
maybe make the justification should business get that tight. But largely speaking, if you're an ongoing concern, marketing should be a staple function in your business because you continually want to recruit new people to your firm, both as
mhm,
advisors and staff as well as clients, right? So,
mhm.
um, and I think it challenges the thinking in terms of like how do you set up for that? And so let me lead into this question: when you think about your time working in different organizations, I know Monique, the firm you just departed, was a different scale and size than Hightower, where Megan was, but both firms had commitment to marketing and PR staff. So how do you decide when it's like what other conditions have to be in terms of uh, installing a C-level marketing or comms person? Like, what do you see as like the checkpoint where firms say, okay, now it's time? Um, I'm sure even as you look for your next opportunities, you're having conversations with firms that are deciding that, hey, we need to professionalize this. So I'd love to hear, like, is there a moment or there a sort of collection of questions or issues that need to get solved to get people to say we need to have a Monique or Megan in the chair here to get things going? Monique, how would you answer that?
Yeah, I would imagine that it's really a commitment to growth and recognizing that marketing is the driver for that growth, and to the extent that significant resources and staff and external partners and marketing spend need to scale. I think that's the point when an organization needs to consider the C-level role for marketing.
And Megan, how would you answer that?
It's interesting because over this past year, I've been doing some consulting here and there, and I think part of it is: do you need somebody executing? Do you need a head of marketing that's executing, or are and some firms need somebody that's executing, or are you ready for the strategy piece? And if you need somebody executing right now and you don't need the strategy piece, that's okay. It's okay. You don't need a CMO right now. And you're in growth mode, but you're not ready for like full, CMO level. And I mean, I had that conversation with a firm. And I think that so I think that that's like kind of taking stock of, at what level growth are you at? Are you really at are you at the strategy piece, or are you at, you know, put your head down and everybody, jump in and go. And I think there's a piece of it, Joe, that goes back to your point. Are you at the growing piece that you could work with an agency right now and get stuff going? And then because there's another piece of like, and then all right, now we're really ready for a CMO, because then there's a benefit to working with, a group like you, because you can help bring in the right people for the next stage and level.
Yeah, well, I think it's always a big leaping off point, and, I was preparing for a panel discussion at Wealth Management Edge, and I came across a stat that blew me away that fewer than 9% of firms with more than 5 billion in AUM have a C-level marketing officer. So there's a lot of firms out there that are covered by that, which means less than 1 in 10 have somebody that's at least in name, if not fully empowered, as a CMO. And so you start thinking about all these firms. I don't think there's a single firm out there that's either that size that is looking to grow or at least looking to look attractive enough to get bought by someone else, right?
Mm.
And so there's a demonstrated it's either lack of buy-in to the process, lack of talent where they can resource say, hey, this person has enough experience and knows our industry well enough to add value and pay at that level. Um, or it's just a sort of misalignment between stated intention and reality, right? So, and I think it's something that from a marketing perspective, because it's also the last thing to be added to building a leadership team, maybe the first thing to go when there's budget cuts. I know, especially in this day and age, your chief technology officer is going to always be the apple of the eye just as much as the chief investment officer in terms of how firms are stacking their deck and running their businesses, right? And so, and of course, the CEO is not firing themselves. So, you start looking at that issue, it becomes a game planning question in terms of how committed are we to the process? How do we resource this and making sure that we've got the right people? And again, there's certain firms who will hire tactical deliverers of marketing output they're doing it to necessitate immediate need, but not necessarily because that person has the direction or support they need to be even fully functional delivering those. So it could be a big kerfuffle for firms trying to wrestle with that. When do you bring in it? How do you do it? Um, so certainly it's something we'll keep an eye on more. One of my last questions is this: you think about your chance as now you no longer directly answer to any CEOs or leaders. What's one piece of advice you would give to CEOs and founders of wealth firms about marketing? If you could give them any points or any insight on I'll pick on you first. Like, how would you tackle that? Like, what advice would you give if they said, "Hey, what do I need to be thinking about? Who do I need to like, whatever?" Like, what would you tell them?
I would not to peak a little bit of, FOMO, but, the firms that are investing in marketing are, they're investing in marketing. They're, making a commitment to, growth and showing up and, the markets where they play. So if a CEO or other C-level is serious about growth, they should be investing in marketing. And that can look like a lot of different things based on what the opportunity is for that firm or what the growth strategy is. So I think there is still a huge role for some of the traditional marketing tactics. The blog posts and the newsletters and the events and all of those pieces are, really tangible and familiar and still reliable. But there are also a lot of uh, digital tactics and things that are evolving constantly that are also really important to your marketing mix. So, my advice would be to hire someone that is able to learn and grow with this industry and commit to marketing. There's literally no downside to it.
All right, Megan, play along with me. How would you address that question? What advice would you give to CEOs who want to get marketing right?
It goes a little bit to what you were just saying. Give marketing a seat at the table, and marketing reports to the CEO. It should not report to the sales, shouldn't report to growth, shouldn't report to operating officer. Marketing needs a seat at the table because marketing works across the organization. I've had this conversation multiple times over the past couple months of inevitably it fails if marketing doesn't have a seat at the table. So I think that because marketing should be working for the benefit of the entire organization.
Great. So my last real question before we get to our parting shots, which is this. It all comes down to justifying our existence as marketers. I have to do it running an agency, making sure that we're delivering value to our clients. Marketers, marketing leaders and their teams have to do it internally when justifying staying with a certain mission or approach. And I know Monique alluded to some KPIs and analytics. This is where this comes in. What are some real, tangible, relevant KPIs and analytics that should be part of your pulse points for marketing? You think about how firms are marketing and showing themselves today. Give us a couple examples of what you think really matters. It should be part of any firm's dashboards in terms of evaluating how their marketing is hitting home.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of firms are looking at, so if you look at your funnel with marketing KPIs at the top and sales KPIs at the bottom, I think most firms are really looking at the sales KPIs. So it's, you know, the percentage of prospects that are converting and then the percentage of clients that might be referring. But they're completely ignoring the top of the funnel, which is, all of your awareness metrics and moving from awareness down to, interest or consideration. And then the key one for me is moving from that consideration into, you know, becoming an identified prospect where you have contact information and you can start to nurture those people or reach out to them. So I think building your marketing funnel and having metrics that are showing those conversion rates from one stage of the funnel to the next. And then, of course, how much money you're spending on each of those different stages, um, and being able to optimize that. Those are some marketing KPIs. I think ultimately being able to show that the money that you're spending on marketing is driving the results that you want to see with new clients, is the most basic that you can get. But yeah, there are a lot of different steps along the way.
1,010%. There isn't a single financial service firm we work with since I started doing this a quarter century ago that it doesn't point to revenue growth, whether it's represented by new AUM, whether it's represented by ability to attract new advisors that bring over new books of business, things like that. It's all comes down to that. So eventually, even though some of the marketing activities aren't discreetly tied to those things, it's nonetheless, we all know that's the ultimate measuring stick. But Megan, when you think about the marketing mix and some of those KPIs or measurables that you think are relevant that firms should be keeping an eye on, both in terms of what I call the immediate consideration and the longer term impact of things, how would you address that? Like, what are some that you would say, hey, keep these on your dashboard, make sure you're paying attention to these things?
I everything that Monique said, I agree 100%. And I like what you said too about, looking at the pipeline flip. Right? Sales is, of course, is important, but marketing is getting you there. So who said to me the other day, marketing is everything that when you're thinking of getting married, right? Marketing is everything that gets you to that proposal. Sales is when you're on your knee, asking to get married. I said, I'm going to use that. He said, I stole from somebody else. Use it all you want. I think one only thing that I would add is, watching referrals too. Like to me, as this proponent of content marketing in these conversations, is referrals too. Like because they're a little bit more anecdotal, but how much of these conversations that we're driving are building referrals too within each of these advisors' business. Like how much of these events that I'm advocating for are building referrals within your business, and how much are you tracking that? I'm always surprised with advisors who are like, "We're doing these amazing events." Well, what's the ROI? Well, they're super fun. Okay, cool. Let's figure out how else we track ROI. So those are the only two things. Because I think Monique, you did an amazing job of talking through everything else.
Awesome. Well, here's we come to the part of the podcast where I ask my guests to give their parting shot. One thing you want the world to know about you, your ideas on marketing, advice you have to up and comers, anything that might tie back to our conversation, sort of the worldview you have as a chance to leave an imprint, a talking point that maybe you wish you were asked to cover. Love to hear what the two of you would leave us with. And Megan, I'll pick on you first again. What would your parting shot be in terms of leaving our audience with something to think about?
I think you talked to us. You at the very beginning, you asked like, "Is this where we thought we would be?" As I've gone through this search of figuring out what I wanted to do next, someone was talking to me about, well, what if you tried this? What if you tried that? And I thought, listen, at the end of the day, I really do love this. I love helping people tell their stories. Like I've gotten to do some really amazing cool things. I worked on a great event that everybody was talking about what their legacy would be. And I sat there looking around this room and everybody was writing out what their legacy would be. And one woman was crying talking about her legacy was going to be helping her husband live his best life. I've gotten to do cool things. So, I'm glad this is where I am.
Awesome. And Monique?
I love that, Megan. I see our role kind of like as matchmakers. We are trying to match a company with a client or customer. And in this business, those matches are so meaningful. You have the opportunity to really shape and influence the trajectory of someone's life and their family's life through those financial planning solutions and wealth management. So I think everything that we're doing is in pursuit of, solving those problems, making those matches and improving lives. I think marketing is a fantastic career for people that are obviously, creative and communicative, but also innovative. There's no shortage of challenges and change in this industry. So it's a wild ride and I wouldn't change it.
Well, I have to say, Megan and Monique, I'm so glad I was able to have you part of this discussion today. I'm really glad I actually caught you in the time of your lives, your free agent status. I appreciate the candor and the reflection that comes with your comments. Any firm in the wealth space that's looking to improve their marketing would do well in speaking with both of you as you look for what's next for in your careers. And I appreciate your time spent here. And again, Monique Kellerman and Meghan McCartan, thank you for joining this episode of Marketing Matchup.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks for listening to Marketing Matchup, a production of Gregory. If you like what you heard, please listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.